Welcome in, everybody, to the CFB Nation All-America podcast. I'm Bill Trocchi, senior editor at sportingnews.com, not alongside Bill Bender,
Not yet.
national college football writer at senior sportingnews.com, but Bryan Driskell, the boss of Irish Breakdown. Bill will be joining us soon. It is live. We have a live show here on the YouTube channel. Getting ready for the unveiling of the first college football playoff rankings. Bill, like I said, he's doing some more media right now. He's going to jump in when he's done, but I'm joined with Bryan Driskell. Bryan Driskell enjoyed a Notre Dame open date last week, and so he is very, very qualified to discuss all of the Week 10 happenings that happened. Before we talk about the rankings, we can talk about the Week 10 happenings. Welcome in, Bryan.
Thanks for having me, Bill. I appreciate it. I thought that when you called me about this the other day, first of all, I was appreciated being invited on, and I was like, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, I knew. Like I said, you were not tied up in a Notre Dame press box somewhere, breaking down the Irish for about 18 hours every Saturday.
Yeah, I can literally just sit, relax, and watch football. And it's a very eye-opening experience in a lot of different ways, Bill. Because as a Notre Dame guy, you're like, okay. Gives you a chance to kind of stack up how Notre Dame is, like how would Notre Dame compete against this team, and then like you watch Georgia struggle for, man, Notre Dame would smack this team, and then you're like, wait a minute, I remember what Notre Dame looked like the day they played Miami of Ohio or Northern Illinois, and you're like, okay, not everybody's defined by how they look in one weekend, but it did back up the point. There's just nobody elite this weekend. There's just a lot of good teams. There's just not any great teams in my opinion, at least not yet. We'll see how people close, but at least not yet.
Let's start with the game everybody was talking about, Penn State, Ohio State. I'm sure you saw that big game on Fox at noon. Penn State was knocking on the door. Well, they were up 10-0. Then they're knocking on the door at the end of the game. The storylines coming out of that, James Franklin cannot win the big one. Had Ohio State lost the game, it would be a Ryan Day cannot win the big one because that's everybody's favorite storyline. What did you think about that game? I've heard a bunch of people discuss it, break it down, this and that. And to me, it's been almost held against Penn State that they got the pick six and that Will Howard fumbled through the end zone. And you're not going to get those breaks against Ohio State, right. Yada, yada, yada. And you still lost and yada. But to me, at least on the pick six, you tell me you're more of an X's and O's guy. I thought that was a great play by Penn State, more than a bad throw by Will Howard, more than a bad play. It was
great. Yeah. Based on the pre-snap read, that was where he should have gone with the football. And Penn State, I mean, you could tell they had scouted that play. Like they had it picked. Sometimes that happens, right? I mean, you make a great call and it gets your guy open for a big play. Sometimes you make a call, you think it's going to work, you've scouted it correctly, and then they just jump it. Now, I think Will Howard did a little bit too much predetermining where he was going to go with the football. I mean, you got to see, okay, I don't think I have that window.
Usually that works with Jeremiah Smith, though.
Right. But it's not so much that he shouldn't have thrown it as much as, okay, you see that guy, throw it on the back shoulder, throw it low and away, maybe pump, let him clear, get behind it. And there's a lot of things he could do. So it's a little bit of, sometimes you just got to tip your cap to the other team and say, hey, well done. Kind of like with the fumble by Will Howard, like, oh, what a terrible play by Will Howard. And yeah, you got to protect the ball better. But that defender did a great job coming behind and knocking the ball out. I mean, sometimes that happens.
That was my point. It's like Penn State made those plays happen. Penn State played great to get up 10-0 and to prevent that touchdown. It wasn't luck necessarily.
Right.
And then, although I will say the play that was lucky, that was another game changer, was that crazy interception in the end zone that Ohio State made.
You've got to make that catch if you're the receiver.
True.
And that's the thing that hurts Penn State is like it's those type of plays that they don't make. I mean, there's all these different narratives you could look at. The officiating favored Ohio State. I believe that it did. Some of the breaks favored Ohio State. I mean, to a degree, sure. But at the same time, you have that ball knock off Will Howard's knee and goes just over the pylon. That was a break that Penn State caught, right?
True.
But that ball hit you in the hands in the end zone. I mean, I don't know how much better of a throw Drew Aller could have made right there. Maybe get it up about 5-6 inches, and you got to make that play. And then I don't give the defender a ton of credit because the ball's like, oh, hey, look, but to have the awareness to catch it and keep his feet in bounds. But then for everything that was going wrong for Penn State in the second half, you get that big play from Tyler Warren. You get 1st and goal at the 3-yard line, and then boom, right up the middle, no creativity, right up the middle, right up the middle. I mean, if they would have called just one read play with Drew Aller, he walks into the end zone backside. I mean, it's just like, I'm a big Chris Katalnicki fan, but my issue is in this particular game, he was either really generic or unnecessarily overly creative, and it just kept the offense from really getting going. But what you do when you look at Penn State is, Bill, the issue that they're going to have in games like this, forget the whole James Franklin can't make the big one. That's a narrative that you can't quantify by what you saw in film, right? It's a different type of discussion. Until Penn State can find a way to get more playmakers on the perimeter, they're going to struggle against Ohio State. They just are. Their trenches, their linemen gave them enough opportunities they battled. They got some decent runs, and sometimes they got stuffed. Ohio State had some decent runs. Sometimes they got stuffed. It was a relatively both O-lines kind of had their moments until the final drive. Ohio State had guys that were able to go out and make plays in big moments, and Penn State didn't. And there were too many opportunities, in my opinion, where Ohio State was willing to take some chances to make plays, and Penn State just wasn't willing to do that. And that's the James Franklin issue is Ohio State's finding ways to beat your blitz, finding ways to get the ball on the perimeter. And Penn State is like they got up 10-0 and they said, hey, let's not make a mistake. And you're not going to win these type of games that way. That's why they Michigan last year without Michigan throwing a single pass in the second half. That's why they always lose Ohio State this way. He's going to have to be more willing to, hey, let it go. Everybody expects you to lose the game anyway. Bill, you and I talked about this last Thursday. Everybody expects Penn State to lose because James Franklin's a coach. Let it all hang out, right? And then you'll get criticized for something. At least then you can look in the mirror and say, hey, we left everything out on the field. It just wasn't good enough.
Welcome in Bill Bender. Bill Bender has hopped into the screen here, or his media duties are completed, apparently. We are breaking down a little Ohio State, Penn State, a Week 10 recap before we get into the rankings release, Bill. I told you, I think on Saturday, Penn State plays these games like a golfer who's staring at a 7-foot putt and hoping it goes in rather than hitting the putt strong and keeping it on the line. And they're hoping. And Bryan, to your point, yes, Penn State does not have great wide receivers, right? This game was won and lost, unfortunately for Penn State, in the last 6 or 7 minutes. In the first and goal situation where you don't really need wide receivers, and then Ohio State pounding out the clock in the final 5 minutes, that isn't the wide receiver's fault either.
Right. Yeah. What did I say? They want. It was a relatively evenly matched game in the trenches until the last 6 minutes, and then it was the Ohio State did it. I mean, Bill. Right? Isn't that kind of where the game came down to? It was back and forth affair, and then last 6 minutes, defensive for Ohio State said, "Okay, you're not getting in on us," and then the Penn State or the Ohio State offensive line said, "Okay, we're gonna go ahead and put this sucker away."
And it's always a handful of plays, and for me, it was. If I was Penn State, I've been saying this all week. I could probably live with the coaching decision more if you just give the ball to Tyler Moore and up the middle, and if he gets stuffed, so be it. And then if instead you throw an awkward-looking pass play into triples, it looked like quadruple coverage. It had no chance, not even a run pass option. And I've seen finishes like that before. And then they couldn't get off the field. In Ohio State, it's been a tale of 2 weeks here. After the Nebraska game, you would have thought Ohio State would never win another football game. And now it's national champs. Are we going to be ranked number 2 tonight? And that's the difference in games like that. So, and on that note, I didn't even really think about it till about 5 minutes ago on Sirius when they posed that. They very well could be ranked number 2 tonight because they did win that game, and it's recency bias over, rather Georgia's done the same things though. They both had 2 top 5 games on the road. I think Georgia might be ranked ahead of them because they have that Clemson win ahead of that.
True. Very true.
It's a little bit better than what Ohio State has, resume-wise.
Let's go down to the SEC and talk about the 2 games in the SEC. The Georgia-Florida game, a lot closer than it probably should have been, especially with the injury to DJ Lagway. Carson Beck keeps throwing interceptions. And then the other big one was South Carolina taking it to Texas A&M, and that knocked A&M back into a group of 5 one-loss teams, I think, in the SEC right now. So Bryan, did South Carolina win surprise you at all? You broke down the Texas A&M Notre Dame game way back in Labor Day weekend. They do not look like the same team they did on Labor Day weekend for the 5 weeks leading up to that South Carolina game, but they really had a lot of trouble on Saturday night.
I don't necessarily agree with that. We fall into that trap, right? We're like, well, just because they lost Notre Dame and they've won since then, they're not the same team. How about Notre Dame's just a really good team that Texas A&M played tight for 3.5 quarters?
Well, they had a different quarterback to start with.
Yeah, but Marcel Reed started 3 games before this weekend, and people ignored that because nobody watched those games. They only watched them against LSU, who can't defend a mobile quarterback, right? And he didn't look. I mean, they scored 20-some points on Bowling Green with him at quarterback. They scored 20-some points on Arkansas with him at quarterback and won 21-17. And then he looked like a Lamar Jackson for a half against LSU off the bench. And then lo and behold, once he's the starter again, he looked like he did in the starts against the other 2 SEC teams that he played, right? I mean, so and Connor Wegman 3 weeks ago, I'm hearing if Connor Wegman would have played against Notre Dame like he did against Missouri, yeah. I mean, doesn't Notre Dame kind of do that to everybody's passing game? Go ask Caleb Williams and CJ Stroud and Drake May. So it's like, I don't think Texas A&M is any different. I just think it was one of those days where Texas A&M has gone through a pretty good stretch of quality opponents, and it just kind of caught up to them. Mm-hmm. And it was just, I think they just ran out of gas in the second half. I really think that's what it was. They had to exert so much energy in coming back against LSU. Arkansas played them tough. Bowling Green played them tough. They've played in a lot of competitive games. I just think they ran out of gas. And this season, none of us should necessarily overreact to a team getting beat. Otherwise, we can say, remember when Georgia barely beat 3-6 Kentucky? And remember when, all these different things happen. So, I think it's one of those things where it's just a further example of there is no great team this year, and Georgia, what we saw from Georgia on Saturday, but that's not new. Georgia's been doing this all year, except for the Texas game in the second half against Alabama. I mean, this is kind of what Georgia's been doing all season, is just kind of going through the motions, and they'll make enough plays when they need to win and all that kind of stuff. It's just, that's kind of been Georgia's MO. And Carson Beck throwing interceptions, that's what he's been doing since the open, really.
Right. I did tell Bill before that as impressive as A&M was in the second half against LSU, you can't live with 2 completed passes against other SEC.
Not when a team has had a whole week to prepare for you.
Right.
That's the big difference. You spend the whole week preparing for Connor Wegman, they throw the other kid in, and it's going to look a whole lot different.
What did you take away from those two SEC games, Bill?
Georgia's got to stop turning the ball over. They're going to get bit again, and that could happen this weekend if they're not careful. With Ole Miss in a desperation game, and South Carolina, if they didn't lose to LSU, they would be a lot higher on this list right now, because they looked good. And I get that's the home field advantage. I understand all that. But I like their defense. I like Shane Beamer. Yeah, they got beat by Ole Miss, and same team that went to Alabama, and that's looking less fluky now. Like, they're playing well. And if the playoff is designed, they're that classic argument. They're not going to make it. But if we're doing the classic argument of, okay, there's a team that got hot at the end of the year. And they've done this before. They did that a couple years with Spencer Rattler. They got hot at the end of the year. I can't remember what their record was at that point. It wasn't.
They got
Notre Dame beat them in the Gator Bowl.
Right. Yeah, that team was hot.
9 games that year, I think.
They were hot late. So I think we'll see if they're ranked. I mean, I think as we get into it here, the SEC will have the most ranked teams tonight. There's no question. But it's just where they stack up. And there's a couple indicators there that, how they have these SEC teams stacked up will show how they value the Big 12 and ACC races.
Speaking of the ACC race, let's touch on that. Let's touch on Louisville blowing out Clemson, and then Miami picking up a big win against Duke. Bryan, you first. I'm sure you kept an eye on that Louisville-Clemson game. What did you think of the Cardinals really taking it to Clemson? I mean, it's 26-7 there, and then Clemson really didn't compete in the second half.
I was surprised by the result, and not that I don't think anyone thought Louisville can't go beat Clemson, but you're predicting them to do something they literally have never done. They've never beat Clemson. I think they're 0-8 against Clemson. First time they played was 2014, and they're usually not close against Clemson. And Clemson's been scoring a ton of points, but as we've talked about in our Thursday show, they're not doing it against anybody. So we don't really know how good Clemson actually is because they're beating up on a bunch of bad teams. Right. Well, they kind of punched Louisville in the mouth early, and Louisville said, we're not NC State. We're not Wake Forest. We're not Florida State, right? We've got as many athletes if you do, if not more. And then they countered. And I just don't think Clemson had any answers. I mean, they had nothing offensively they could turn to. And I think the issue that they've had all year is they don't have a very good secondary. And their pass rush is not what I thought it was going to be. It's like they've almost turned their D-line to like 4 D tackles, and they just couldn't get any consistent pressure. And they're not good enough in the secondary to consistently cover those guys. I mean, even Notre Dame, when Tyler Shuck got credit, as great as Notre Dame's secondary is, he was able to complete a couple balls down the field, and you don't have Notre Dame secondary at Clemson. And so I was really shocked at that. It almost was like at the end of the last 10 minutes, they were just playing to make it a closer loss than actually try and come back to win.
And Dabo couldn't do the math to go for 2 either.
Twice.
We were laughing about that. I'm like, does he know that 13 and 12 doesn't make a difference? You should try to get it to 11.
It's like Brian Kelly in 2014 against Northwestern. You know, they go up 11, and he's like, let's go for 2 instead of, just kicking the extra point and going up 12. There's no difference between 12 and 13. You just don't want it to be 11. It was wild.
Bill, what'd you think about Miami? Little trouble there with Duke for a little while there, but then Cam Ward did his Cam Ward thing.
Yeah, they're fine. They're the team that the committee will probably. I'm interested to see how many 1-loss teams will be slid ahead of them. You guys are gonna have to tell me. I don't have TV down here, by the way, so you're gonna have to read off these.
We've already got that all figured out. Yeah. Bill's going to handle that, and we're just going to react.
Okay, so but no, I mean the best news for them was Clemson losing, because their path is open now, and unless they screw up against at Georgia Tech, which I don't think they will, or at Syracuse, which I don't think they will, they're going to be undefeated. So you get into the college football or the ACC championship game with an undefeated record. They're probably going to play SMU in that. So.
They're also probably going to make it without playing a ranked team all season.
Well, ranked now. I mean, Louisville's going to end up being ranked, right? But Louisville, that's the thing, is that's why I always kind of like the end of season rankings, because it doesn't always. I mean, people now realize, wow, Louisville losing by a touchdown to Notre Dame and a touchdown to SMU looks a whole lot better now than maybe it did the end of September, first week of October.
Yep.
But you are correct. At the time they played, they will not have played a
right. All right, let's touch on the Big 12 real quick. All of a sudden, guess who's tied for second place? It's Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes. Bill, what do you think about their path to the playoff? You wrote about that on sportingnews.com today. They're going to be probably in the low 2019, 2021 in that area. We'll find out soon. Any chance outside of winning the Big 12 championship, could they get an at-large?
Yeah, I mean, well, they have to get to the Big 12 championship game to do it, and I mean,
and then lose. So that would be a third loss.
They'll probably be left out at that point. I don't know that they can get, but I mean, I don't know is the question, the answer, because I know that's great analysis, but anybody that has 2 losses or less right now in a Power 4 conference is still technically alive. So you just take care of your business. I mean, what if they go 10-2 and I guess Iowa State beats Kansas State? They're still ahead of Colorado, right? But they don't play. But they would technically be ahead because Colorado has that second loss. If BYU and Iowa State played in the Big 12 championship and BYU or one or the other beat the other one, and then Colorado had to be close, right? Like, so all they got to do is, this is the big one for them this weekend. They got to beat Texas Tech. That's the tricky game, and then they play Utah. But if they win this weekend, that conversation will get a little bit louder.
All right. Well, that was a good look back on the Week 10 action. Now we're going to have part 2 of Week 10, I guess. Every day Tuesday night, we're going to have these big reveals and see what the committee is looking at. It's going to be really fun to see how much the committee value strength of schedule, because they tend to do that more than the pollsters, generally speaking. So we will go down the list as they review and kind of just give our opinions as we see.
Yes, I'm good with that. Have they started?
We're doing the transition.
Welcome into the rankings reveal here for college football, CFB Nation. All-America podcast. We got a 3-man booth to break down the first reveal of the top 25. And then, of course, I'm sure they'll have some sort of mock bracket to project conference winners and things like that. We are live on the YouTube channel. Thank you for Bryan Driskell at Irish Breakdown for setting that up for us. So we're knocking them off here. Well, we got some surprises already. So let me go, Bill.
Lots of them.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. So number 25 is Army. Number 24, Missouri. 23, Clemson. 22, Louisville. And 21, John Mateer and my Washington State Cougars, who can only get in as an at-large, as a reminder. Any of those 5 grab you, Bryan? How about all of them?
Well, if you're a Notre Dame fan, that was a huge first batch, right? Because Army's in the top 25. So, and they've got North Texas in a bye week before they play Notre Dame. So as teams lose, they may go up. And then Louisville jumping it at 22 is big for Notre Dame as well, because now Notre Dame's going to end up with 2 top 25 wins already of teams that are in there that they've already played. And then Colorado at 20, if they can win out, puts themselves in a position where they could really kind of get into there, not only to get in, but they need the Big 12 team. If it's not BYU, is not only hoping to get in, but they're hoping that they don't get the 5. They're the 5th lowest ranked conference champion right now, because they're all of them except BYU right now are going to be ranked behind Boise State.
So my first takeaway is they're not valuing strength of schedule as much as I thought they would, because Army's ranked, because Washington State is 21st. Now we're into 19 Kansas State, 18 Pitt, 17 Iowa State. Point being, we haven't gotten to Boise yet. They don't have any sort of strength of schedule either, really. They got the Oregon game, of course, but they lost it.
They beat Washington State, who
the committee respects. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So we'll see where they pop up. Ole Miss is 16, Bill. I'll review these right once we fill the screen here with number 15. And then I'll let you, Bill, take the next 5. And we'll go 20 to 15, see what you think of those guys. Still waiting on 15. So basically, Bill, 20 is Colorado.
LSU.
19 Kansas State. 18 Pitt. 17 Iowa State. 16 Ole Miss. And you said 15's Pitt?
LSU.
LSU. Mm-hmm. There we go. All right. Any of those grab you, Bill? You're on mute. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not on mute.
You're good now. I unmuted.
Pitt is high. I mean, I guess they like Pitt a little bit higher. So far the ACC race a little nice there. Iowa State matching ranking with the AP, and Ole Miss matching ranking with the AP. And they flipped Kansas State with Colorado, which is right in my book, because Kansas State beat Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that also at Colorado?
Correct.
Okay.
It was.
Yeah.
They burned Travis Hunter's backup for a 50-yard touchdown pass with like 2 minutes to go.
Well, one thing I noticed, you talk about the ACC, there's going to be 4 ACC teams ranked now, right? 5.
Yeah.
There's going to be 5 ACC teams ranked, because you already have Clemson, Louisville, and Pitt, and you're going to also have Miami and SMU. So there's going to be 5 ACC teams ranked, which I'll be honest with you, is a little bit surprising to me. I thought there'd only be 4. And then they're ranked relatively well. Like Louisville's ahead of where they're in both the polls. I think they're like 25 in the AP and Coaches Poll. They're at 22, because I think they're looking at their overall strength of schedule. And I think that's where they are giving them a lot of credit, Bill, where they are looking at strength of schedule for some teams, because that's why you have Louisville with 3 losses that high, because their 3 losses are going to be the top 15 teams by a touchdown. And some of the teams they've beat are quality teams. They beat Clemson. They beat a good Georgia Tech team who's 5-4. So I think Louisville's getting a lot of credit for their strength of schedule. But to your point, like K-State doesn't have a great strength of schedule. Army doesn't have it. I think their opponent records a combined 17-41. But as I said, that's good for Notre Dame. Certainly good for Notre Dame.
All right, so they're doing the rankings here, and 14 is Texas A&M. They're labeling them as the second team out. 13 is SMU. They're labeling them as the first team out. So SMU didn't get in. Obviously, Notre Dame is in this group because we haven't seen them pop up. Boise at 12, Alabama at 11. I believe that's how you had it, Bill, in this sportingnews.com rankings, correct?
Yeah, and Alabama would be the 11 seed then, right? So they're the last at large, technically.
Yes.
There you go. And highest ranked 2-loss team. All things that we anticipated, and so far pretty much what we thought.
It's interesting. Boise State is the 12th ranked team and the 12th seed, which that's a coincidence. It's not necessarily supposed to be like that. Yeah, so Alabama gets in. It's a tradition, right? That they're always the highest ranked 1-loss team, the highest ranked 2-loss team, the highest ranked 3-loss team every year, right? So Alabama gets it, right? Because everyone else is gonna have 1 or 0 losses, correct? I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think so. Yeah.
Yes.
From here, Alabama's the first one. Notre Dame 10. So Notre Dame is the 10 seed and the 10 ranking. Bill, you had Notre Dame at what?
10.
10.
So far, I mean, I could have just done.
Are you on the committee, Bill? Jeez,
I should be, maybe.
What we've learned from this ranking is that the committee is putting a lot more value on losses than who you beat. Because the only justification you have for having Penn State ahead of Notre Dame is they have a better loss.
I think
Penn State is not beating anyone in the top 25. No one in the top 25. Their combined record of their opponents is sub 500. So you're seeing that's where the first thing where the Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois is being viewed by the committee not well.
The committee reads sportingnews.com a lot.
I know. If BYU, if Indiana's 8, that means
BYU is 9. Do you have
Indiana's
BYU at 9?
Indiana's 8.
And that's Indiana's what I have.
Holy mackerel.
And I have a loud keyboard, Driskell says, so I will mute when I'm typing these in. It can't be that loud. It's a Mac.
We can all hear it.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have Indiana at 8, which means they're going to be Penn State's going to be ahead of undefeated. I don't, and we see this every year. I don't get the obsession they have with Penn State. I don't. They beat all these bad teams and never beat anyone good, and the committee always ranks Penn State high. Like honestly, how was Penn State ahead of Indiana? They have a better win or a better loss. Indiana has literally played the same teams that Penn State has for the most part and blasted them. So Penn State, we're banking their success on choking at home to Ohio State and beating Illinois. Like that's what we're basing Penn State's resume on.
You think Indiana stays within 7 of Ohio State?
It doesn't matter. That game hasn't been played yet.
But you think they would?
It doesn't matter. That game hasn't been played yet. It's supposed to be off the resume we have. This is what the committee always says. It's off the resume they've played. It's not off arbitrary. Well, if this team would have played that team, this thing would have happened. And Tennessee 7, which means Penn State's going to be ahead of Tennessee. I do not understand their infatuation with Penn State. I don't get it.
Tennessee hasn't really done it. You put Tennessee.
They beat Alabama.
Tennessee and Indiana's resumes together, like they barely beat everybody, but they beat Alabama by 7.
Alabama.
They did. They beat Alabama by 7 at home. Indiana's just killing everything in its path. That's the thing. Right. So it's funny. That's how it's totally different resumes, totally different approach. Indiana's beating bad teams, but they're beating them bad. Tennessee is kind of,
who has Penn State blown out? Kent State?
They handled West Virginia pretty easily, if I recall.
Week 1, they beat Bowling Green by a touchdown. They beat Illinois by 14. They beat UCLA by 16. They beat USC by 3, beat Wisconsin by 15, and then lost Ohio State.
I think the Wisconsin win's better than anything Indiana has, though. And so, yeah, they have better. I mean, they went there at night and won. Like, you can't say, like, right now, Indiana's best win, and they crushed them, is Nebraska.
By 49. I mean, don't you think how teams are playing should have a little bit of say on how that's going?
I mean,
right?
Indiana might beat Penn State, but this is the laundry thing.
Yeah.
They don't wear Penn State's helmet.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Penn State's at 6.
Penn State's at 6. You're a little bit ahead of me, but okay. Penn State at 6. So that would set up a Notre Dame Penn State. Round 1, Notre Dame at Penn State.
Please, Lord, let that happen.
110,000 people. This is like old school Lou Holtz, Joe Paterno stuff right there, man. Come on.
Can one of you guys make a case for Penn State being 6 outside of OG? They have a good loss.
I mean, what else are you going to do? You could put Tennessee there if you want. Tennessee's 7, correct? I missed that.
Yes.
So mine matches. You could have just read our bracketology on Sunday night because it's what it's going to be. It's going to be exactly the same.
Texas is 5.
But still, what's the case? Not, well, who could you? I mean, make the case. for Penn State. Someone please make the case for me that Penn State should be ranked 6 based on their resume this year. Are they impressed by that really blowout? Oh, wait a minute. They didn't blow out UCLA, who sucks. Who, by the way, Indiana beat, 42-16? Right? At UCLA.
At the Rose Bowl,
beat them by
baby.
16 at home.
At the Rose Bowl.
Right? I mean, so again, this happens every time I debate about Penn State. They say, well, yeah, but they don't actually make the case for why the committee always loves Penn State, other than, like you said, Bill Trocchi, it's the helmet. Like, that's the only case you can make.
It's their helmet. I mean, I don't have anything else other than that's what they do in these things. And that's not going to change. They will grade you by your helmet sometimes.
Undefeated
doesn't mean we should
gets
say it's okay.
team.
Right? I mean, isn't that what we're doing, right? We're providing analysis of what they're doing. And I think somebody's going to eventually have to make a case for me why Penn State's considered good.
Well, here comes the debate. Is it Georgia or Ohio State at 2? I still think it will be Georgia.
Georgia at 3.
Georgia's 3.
Miami's 4. Georgia's at 3.
Okay, so that's the only thing I missed because I had Georgia. Well, no, we have Georgia as a conference champion anyway. So, yeah, our bracket is still intact.
Ohio State 2, which means Oregon is going to be number 1. So there you go, guys.
So Ohio State,
first one is set.
2, Oregon 1. So Ohio State, the number 2 ranked team in the rankings reveal, will get the 5 seed and play Boise State and BYU to get to the final semifinals.
Pretty nice draw. It's a really nice draw for Ohio State.
That's what I'm saying. Which, if you're the number 2 team, I guess that's fine, right?
Right. I actually made the case for this, Bender, on our show earlier yesterday. I made the case for Ohio State being ahead of Georgia. I said the only pushback you can give me is you don't want to have the same 2 teams from the same conference, 1 and 2, which I don't find overly compelling. When you look at the resumes and how Ohio State has played compared to how Ohio State has played a sneaky quality schedule this season.
They have.
Where there's not a lot of ranked teams, but there's a lot of good teams.
Who have they played?
They beat Iowa, right? So I'm going to pull off so if you look at their ranking, their record of their opponents, Ohio State's opponents this year have a combined record of 43-26. So they played obviously 9-0. Oregon. They beat Penn State this weekend. They beat Iowa, who's 6-3. They beat Western Michigan, who's 5-3. Ohio State is tied with, I think, Bama for the most wins over teams with a record above 500. It's Texas, Bama, and Ohio State.
So what's Georgia's record against theirs?
Combined records is 31-28. They've played 2 teams with a record above 500, currently above 500.
Yeah, but
that's about to ramp up, though. They got some more.
Again, this ranking is off of where we are now. It's not a projection of what may happen 3 weeks from now.
But I was not better than like Florida.
Well, okay, but Iowa's better than Kentucky, who Georgia beat by a point. They're better. Right. I would say they are better than Florida. Florida's not a very good football team.
No, I don't know that
we're only saying they're good because they played They played Georgia and Tennessee stuff, who are both struggling right now.
Yeah, and they beat Clemson 34-3, and that's a quality victory to me. I know they lost last week. They are ranked.
Win.
So, and they both played 2 top 5 teams on the road. I was just sorting this out before I came on. I don't care. Like, it's one way you can put Ohio State there. That's fine. But if they would have put Georgia there, I would have been like, I'm not going to sit here and stump for. I'm not going
to bash him for having Georgia.
Right, I wouldn't, and I'm not going to. But I'm also not going to stump for Ohio State playing Western Michigan. Who cares? Like at Western Michigan,
Bill, it's about the quality of the schedule, top to bottom. If you play 2 good teams and 6 trash teams, I don't respect your schedule as much as a team who may only play like 1 good team and then a bunch of quality teams, because it's about that consistent wear and tear. And we have seen Georgia consistently this year play down to the level of their opponents. They played ugly against Auburn. They played ugly against Mississippi State. The only reason that we're viewing Georgia the way that we are is because they're Georgia and they won 2 national championships. And they had a great win over Texas. Where we've seen teams have those kind of wins, but Georgia has not played like a great team for most of this season.
Right. Well, overall, arching takeaway here is I think the committee did fine. We love bashing the committee. Overall, this top 25 looks damn near close to the AP top 25 anyway. So other than
which I would not exactly hail as a beacon of accuracy because it's close to the AP ranking.
Well, that's right. There's no Vanderbilt in these rankings, so there's a problem.
Missouri's in one, Vanderbilt's in the other. I respect the AP. There's a lot of good people, right?
So let me say, here's going to be the challenge about putting Vanderbilt over Missouri, because Vanderbilt has a better record and they beat Vanderbilt. Missouri has a better record and they beat Vanderbilt, which I don't necessarily. Yeah, I mean, it's about the totality of it, but at some point in time, say better record, won the head-to-head.
Yep,
I actually understand that one, and I think Missouri's top 25 ranking is going to get taken care of down the road. But I'm actually not as opposed to Missouri being in as like I wouldn't have argued if you'd had Vanderbilt in, because I think their overall resume is better. But that head-to-head has to matter to some degree, right?
Sure.
So and like Notre Dame, they've got that Georgia State loss that they have to deal with as well earlier.
The 7 at large, 3 SEC, 3 Big Ten, and Notre Dame. I think
it matches what we put out Sunday, though. Like the matchups are the exact same.
It matches what college football fans would expect.
Yeah, I 4 Miami, I'm good with. 5 Texas, Tennessee being where they are, Indiana and BYU being ahead of Notre Dame. I said on our show the other day, I have no problem with, because they've played Northern Illinois caliber teams and beat Northern Illinois caliber teams, right? You can't discount that. I said I would be comfortable with Notre Dame anywhere between 8 and 10. I thought that the AP poll showed. I'm glad that the committee had A&M ahead of LSU, because A&M has a better record and they won the head-to-head, where I thought it was ridiculous that the AP dropped A&M behind LSU. You know what I mean? Which is like, okay, is our recency bias going to be that strong? But I do think it's fair to have them close to each other, guys. I mean, LSU whooped A&M in the first half, and then A&M whooped LSU in the second half. You know what I mean? Like, I'm comfortable with those. My only big beef with this poll, honestly, is I'll say it again. We do this every year. Somebody has to make a case for why Penn State continues to get the hype that they get. Somebody's going to have to convince me of that. And nobody has, except, they have nice helmets, which I know what that means. It's not about the nice helmet. It's their Penn State. But if you're going to do that, well, let's just move Alabama up then. You know what I mean? Who has far better wins than what Penn State has. And if Penn State, if you want to do who do they play? Who would play this? All right, cool. What would Penn State's record be if they had to play Alabama's schedule? Probably worse than 6-2, don't you think?
I don't know. I mean, maybe they would have probably lost to. They beat Vanderbilt because James Franklin
lose to Georgia.
Lost to Georgia. They would be 6-2 or 5-3. They're still. I think we're penalizing them a little too much for
what?
Losing by a touchdown to Ohio State.
I don't care about the losing by a touchdown. That was actually one of the best things on their resume. My issue is you've rarely ever scored above 30 points. You barely beat mediocre to bad teams week after week, not overly impressively. Like 27-11 over UCLA in a game they pulled away from late. They pulled away from Penn State late, or Wisconsin late. What happened to Wisconsin this past weekend when they went and played Iowa, who apparently is not very good? They got destroyed.
Fair.
Right? So, we just got done saying, well, Iowa's not that good. Well, Iowa just beat Wisconsin 42-10, and Penn State had to come from behind to beat them by 15. Penn State beat Bowling Green by a touchdown. They beat Illinois by 14 points. They beat USC, who's 4-5, in overtime in the game. They come back from 20-6. They've scored below 30 points in each of their last 5 games. Right. So, again, that's the number 6 team in the country.
One other observation. So there's no other Big Ten teams in the top 25 except the 4 that are in the tournament. So SEC has Texas A&M on the bubble, LSU on the bubble, Ole Miss on the bubble. 3 teams kind of knocking on the door along with SMU. Those are basically the first 4 teams out, and those are the teams that are really got their work in their work cut out for them. Their opportunities in front of them. and it's going to be like the bubble chase in the NCAA tournament. It's going to be fun to watch.
Can I ask you guys a question? What Big Ten team do you think, and this is a genuine question, has the best chance to play themselves in over this last month of the season?
Beyond the top 4?
Yeah, like if we're talking about, can the Big Ten get more?
Nobody.
Okay. So if Minnesota, the team I actually think has a chance to play themselves into the top 25, not into the playoffs.
Oh, top 25, sure. Yeah. Minnesota, yeah.
Right.
I mean,
they're 6-3 and they got Penn State at home.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Nobody else is getting in though. That's
no. I'm talking about into the top 25 because that matters when you start getting into like seeding. You know, where do you place this Big Ten team once they get some losses compared to this SEC team? I'm just curious who you think from the Big Ten might have the best chance. I think the two that make the most sense obviously be Minnesota and Iowa. I think Iowa because they would, they beat UCLA, Maryland, Nebraska. None of them are any good, but they'd be hot. They'd won 5 in a row, et cetera, et cetera.
Minnesota doesn't play any of the top 4.
They play Penn State at home.
They do play Penn State.
Yeah. Okay. So they've got Rutgers on the road this weekend and a bye. Then they play home at Penn State and then at Wisconsin. So I think actually if they can somehow upset Penn State, obviously that's a no-brainer. But I think there's actually only 2 teams in the Big Ten that could potentially play themselves in, which I think could maybe help with some of that jockeying when you start getting to, where's Indiana going to be if they catch a loss? Does Penn State completely fall out if they lose another game? That kind of thing. And it tells me, the Big Ten has as many in the top, fewer teams in the top 25 than the ACC, which I would not have predicted that. I would have said maybe the same coming into the night.
All right. One final question before we get out of here. Bill's got to do some writing for sportingnews.com on this, but let me read you the first round matchups. All right. We got Tennessee and Indiana, Ohio State, Boise State, Texas, Alabama, Penn State, Notre Dame. Bill Bender, you go first. What's your most fun game there? Most fun matchup? Oh, you want to see Aston Genty against this Ohio State defense? What do you like?
Penn State, Notre Dame. The rest of them aren't that great, honestly. Like if we're being
in the snow.
I mean, yeah, like Penn, they haven't played in a long time. So
not since 2007.
I believe one of those games was a Jimmy Clausen production.
That was the last time they played, 07.
So, Texas, Alabama, I've watched that the last 2 years.
Yeah, and they were fun.
They're fun. I'm not saying it wouldn't be fun. Tennessee, Indiana, I feel like they played in a bowl game somewhat recently, maybe. Yes. I could be way off saying that. And then, Ohio State would beat Boise State by 17 points. So, and their fans would grumble the whole week about having to play an extra game. So that would probably happen. Genty at the shoe is cool, but that wouldn't be a close game.
All right, Bryan Driskell, what are your thoughts on Notre Dame getting by Penn State and then having to play the Georgia Bulldogs?
I think that's a great draw for Notre Dame, and not great draw from the standpoint of they're going to smack Georgia, but if Notre Dame is going to prove that they're a contender, they have to prove that they can, number one, win some of these type of big games, right? And Penn State obviously is a great matchup for Notre Dame. But if you're going to prove that you're on that upper echelon, you've got to play and beat a Georgia. I'm not one of those Notre Dame fans that is looking for that easy draw. I don't want to play this team, and I hope this team gets. No, you've got to eventually prove yourself. And if you avoid those teams, it's like when John Beilein, you compare his first title run to his second title game run. The first one, you had to beat Kansas and Florida. The second one, you're beating your highest ranked seeded team you beat was a 7. You guys remember that? And they played Loyola Chicago in the Final Four, right? You want to know how good you really are by playing the big boys. And if Notre Dame ever matched up well against Georgia, and we have seen them match up very well with Georgia in the past, this is your chance to do it on a neutral field. So I like that draw. I think Penn State does not match up very well against Notre Dame. They really
the national champion will have to play big boys all the way through, which is the lure of the 12-team tournament.
I will spoil one thing. We have bowl projections coming out tomorrow, and the only first-round upset I would pick out of that bunch would be Notre Dame over Penn State. And I'm not doing it.
The only road win? And
that would be the only road win I would pick there, and not just to kiss up to Bryan.
But we know you wouldn't do that, Bill. Don't even.
No, that's the only one. That's the only one I picked that had Notre Dame in the quarterfinals, because I do think it's going to be hard for any of these teams to win 4 games.
All right. Well, Bryan Driskell, thank you very much for setting this up on the live show on YouTube channel. We love it. We love being on YouTube, the CFP Nation channel. Subscribe to that one, and you can see us if we start doing some more of this stuff. Thank you, everybody, for listening on the CFP Nation channel, our podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or whenever you're listening to this, the non-live listeners, which will probably be a majority, hopefully. But anyway, we will have our Week 11 preview. We'll break down Alabama and LSU. The rankings are going to shake up immediately. So after all this breakdown and analysis, we're going to start over next Tuesday. But that's part of the fun of college football in November nowadays. So thank you, everybody, once again, and we will see you soon.
Irish Breakdown, 8 o'clock. We're going to do our Notre Dame wrap-up of the rankings, so join us there.